Travel Through Grief. Welcome to Travel Through Grief. I'm your host, Ellen Beckemeyer. I have to admit, today's episode, it began with a smile for me. It's one of those wonderfully unexpected days on the calendar when two completely different observances happen to share the same date. You see, today, it's National Tape Measure Day, celebrating one of the simplest and most practical tools ever invented. But it's also Bastille Day, France's national holiday commemorating the beginning of the French Revolution in 1789. At first, I couldn't imagine how those two belonged in the same conversation, but I had something pulling at me. You see, one is about a tape measure. The other, it's about liberty, history, and a nation finding its identity. But then I started thinking about travel, and suddenly the connection seemed obvious. You see, National Tape Measure Day, it honors the patent granted on July 14, 1868 to Alvin J. Fellows for the improvements to the retractable tape measure. Now, it isn't a glamorous invention. You'll never see a tape measure on the cover of a travel magazine or hear someone say it's their favorite possession. Most of us, we toss one into a kitchen drawer, a toolbox, or the garage and don't think much about it until we need it. And then, suddenly, it's indispensable. I mean, we have to measure a room before buying a sofa, a window before hanging curtains, or even a suitcase before checking airline restrictions. It quietly helps us understand the world around us 1 inch and 1 foot at a time. Or, if you're doing metrics, those measurements. Travel is filled with measurements. We measure the miles between cities, the hours until our flight boards, the distance we'll walk through an airport, maybe the elevation of a mountain or the height of a cathedral, and the number of countries that we've visited. We even measure anniversaries. This year, America has been celebrating 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It has been a wonderful reminder that history gives us perspective. 250 years, that sounds like an enormous number until you begin imagining all the lives, hopes, struggles, and dreams that unfolded in those years. A number alone could never tell that story. That's why Bastille Day feels especially meaningful this year. Every July 14th, France celebrates a defining moment in its own history. And as Americans, we really can't reflect on our own story without remembering that France became one of our earliest allies. The friendship between our two countries, that helped shape history in ways never could have imagined at that time. Years later, that friendship found one of the most recognizable symbols when France presented the United States with the Statue of Liberty. Millions of visitors have stood before her in the New York harbor, but fewer people realize, she has a younger sister quietly standing in Paris along the Seine. I've been fortunate. I've seen both of them. The first time I saw the Statue of Liberty in person was in 1984. My family and I were visiting New York City, and we were riding the Staten Island ferry. The camera in my hand, excited to finally see one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world. And as the ferry moved across the harbor, there she was. Except she didn't look like the photographs in the travel brochures. And that was because she was wrapped in scaffolding. At first, I remembered feeling just a little disappointed because I thought I was missing the perfect view. It meant we didn't get to go up in her. But looking back now, I realize I wasn't missing anything at all. I was witnessing history. The Statue of Liberty was undergoing a massive restoration in preparation for her centennial celebration in 1986. And the photograph I took that day, that captured a chapter of her story that many people never saw. It's interesting to think about what it took to restore her. Somewhere during that project, engineers and craftspeople were doing exactly what National Tape Measure Day celebrates. They were measuring everything, every beam, every support, every panel of copper. Every replacement piece had to fit with extraordinary precision, because preserving something that important, that requires care. So in that instance, a tape measure, it was not just a tool. It was part of preserving history itself. That's something I had never considered until I began preparing for this episode. Years later, I found myself in Paris. Before the trip, I had already learned that Paris had its own Statue of Liberty, so I knew I wanted to visit it. But one of my favorite memories happened before I ever reached the statue. I was standing on the Eiffel Tower taking in that breathtaking panoramic view that seems to stretch forever. The city of Paris unfolded beneath me in every direction. The Seine River curved gracefully through the city, and then suddenly I spotted it, a familiar silhouette. There she was, the Paris version of the Statue of Liberty. And even though I knew she existed, I wasn't expecting to discover her from that vantage point. It felt like seeing an old friend in an unexpected place. Of course, we made our way down. Standing there beside the Seine, camera in hand once again, I couldn't help but think back to the day on the Staten Island ferry. Decades, they separated those two photographs, but somehow they belonged together. One was taken in New York City while the larger statue was being lovingly restored, and the other was taken in Paris beside the smaller sister, who quietly reminds visitors of a friendship that has endured for generations. Those two pictures now sit in my collection, not because they're famous landmarks, but because together they tell part of my own travel story. If someone handed us a tape measure long enough to stretch across the Atlantic Ocean, we could calculate the exact distance between those two statues. We could measure every mile from New York Harbor to Paris. We could calculate the height of each monument, the width of their pedestals, even the distance between the Eiffel Tower and the smaller Statue of Liberty. Those numbers would all be accurate. They would all be useful, but they still wouldn't explain why those statues matter. That's the beautiful thing about travel. It teaches us that the most meaningful parts of a journey rarely appear on a map. Now, a map can tell us where to go. I am from the paper era. And a GPS, it can tell us how many miles still remain. And an airline can even tell us how long we'll be in the air. But none of those measurements explain how it feels to stand in a place you've dreamed about for years. They can't measure the excitement of seeing New York Harbor for the first time. They can't measure the quiet joy of recognizing liberty from the Eiffel Tower. And they certainly can't measure the gratitude we feel when history suddenly becomes personal. I've often said that travel changes us, but maybe that's because travel connects us. It connects us to history, to cultures, different from our own, to people we've never met, and sometimes even to earlier versions of ourselves. When I look at those two photographs today, I don't just see two statues. I see two chapters of my own life. I remember where I was, who I was traveling with, and what I was feeling, and how each journey expanded my understanding of the world. The miles mattered because they got me there, but the memories mattered because they stayed with me. America's 250th anniversary has prompted many of us to reflect on where we've been as a nation. And Bastille Day, that invites France to do the same. History often begins with dates, but it lives through stories. July 4, 1776, July 14, 1789, and July 14, 1868. Those dates give us a place to begin, but they aren't the whole story. Behind every date are people who hoped, sacrificed, created, explored, built, and dreamed. History is never just a timeline. It's a collection of human experiences passed from one generation to the next. Maybe that's why I love landmarks so much. They aren't simply things to photograph, even though I love to do that. What they are is storytellers. They remind us that people came before us, that someone imagined them, built them, preserved them, and now we have the privilege of standing in their presence. The Statue of Liberty isn't remarkable simply because she's tall. She's remarkable because of what she represents. And the smaller version of her in Paris isn't special because of her size. She's special because she quietly reminds us that friendship can stretch farther than any ocean. As I thought about National Tape Measure Day this week, I realized that perhaps a tape measure is a wonderful symbol for travel after all. One end stays anchored where you begin, and the other reaches toward where you're going. Every journey starts with one point and stretches toward another. Yet no matter how carefully we measure the miles, we eventually discover that distance was never the most important part of the trip. The destination changes us, the people enrich us, and the stories stay with us, and the memories become part of who we are. So today, as we celebrate National Tape Measure Day and Bastille Day together, I'm very grateful for both. One reminds me that careful measurements help us build and preserve remarkable things. The other reminds me that liberty, friendship, and shared ideals can connect people across continents and even centuries. Together they tell a story that is much bigger than either holiday alone. I still smile when I look at those two photographs. One was taken from the Staten Island ferry while Lady Liberty stood wrapped in scaffolding, preparing for another century. And the other was taken from the Eiffel Tower beside the Seine as I first spotted her. Between those two photographs are decades of life, countless miles traveled, lessons learned, friendships made, and memories collected. Now, a tape measure, it could calculate every mile between New York and Paris if it was long enough. It could never calculate everything that happened between those two moments in my own life. Perhaps that's the greatest reminder travel gives us. Measure the miles, learn the history, celebrate those anniversaries, and visit the landmarks. But don't forget to look beyond the numbers, because the most extraordinary part of every journey isn't how far we've traveled. It's how deeply we became connected to the places, the people, and the stories we were fortunate enough to experience. I want to thank you for traveling with me today, and until next time, may your journeys continue to remind you that while miles can always be measured, meaning is something we carry home in our hearts. If this episode connected with you, I'd love for you to follow our podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who may need it. Those small actions truly help new podcasts like Travel Through Grief grow and reach more people. And thank you to everyone who has already listened, rated, reviewed, and supported this journey. I appreciate you more than you know. Until next time, keep finding your way forward.